you. We will start with a short introduction by Bruno Pillon, chairman of France Ciment, and we will follow with the other speakers.
Okay, thank you, Laure. So hi everyone, I'm very pleased to welcome you today to this event, which is co-organized by France Ciment, as Laure just pointed out, and GCCA, so the Global Cement and Concrete Association, as a side event of the Building and Climate Global Forum that is being held in France this very week. It is my privilege to welcome you with my double hat as the President of France Ciment and President of Heidelberg Materials France, since we are gathered today at the Alto Tower in La Défense, where our headquarters are located. Today's event is particularly important. As you know, our industry is at a crossroad and at the heart of the challenges of ecological transitions all over the world. While many government representatives from all continents are and will be present in Paris in these coming days to discuss the future of construction in the context of climate change, we, the cement industry, have a lot to say and a lot to show. First of all, there is a lot to say because we have all made commitments around the world to contribute to the success of the ecological transition and to be at the rendezvous of a carbon neutral world by 2050. In this regard, I would like to specially welcome Thomas Guillot, CEO of GCCA, who will present the decarbonization roadmap of our industry on a global scale in a few moments. In France, the trade association France Ciment published a new roadmap in May 2023. This roadmap is even more ambitious than the previous one, with a target of reducing the sector CO2 emission by 50% by 2030. How? Firstly, by accelerating the decarbonization of processes, the use of alternative fuels, the reduction of clinker levels, etc. And then secondly, by deploying carbon capture technology, CCUS, as a last resort for unavoidable emissions. So a lot to say, but above all, a lot to show. A lot to show because, and this is for us the most important thing, our commitments are already being converted into very concrete actions. I would like to thank each of the speakers who will present in a few minutes some of the realities of our industry, whether this is CO2 capture, circular economy and recycling, or even carbon-free cements, through the example of EvoZero, the world's first carbon capture net zero cement. Thank you to Pierre Bernard from CRH, Ryan Roberts from Holcim, and Sergio Tortelli from Heidelberg Materials for joining us. A lot to say, a lot to show, and also a lot to provide, because if we are part of the problem of the carbon footprint for buildings, we are surely the solution. And because it is the entire value chain that is mobilized in the decarbonization of construction, with the support of all the actors, from the thinkers, the knowers, to the doers, I would like warmly to thank Isabelle Spiegel, Sustainability Chief Officer from Vinci, and Professor Karen Scrivener, who are doing to us the kindness of their presence. We are now experiencing a real momentum thanks to the unprecedented mobilization of all the players in the value chain to drive a dynamic of sustainable innovations. A demanding path that calls for dialogue and consultation with the public authorities to urgently deploy the means that will condition the success of our action plans here in France, like anywhere else across the world. Together, we will go further and faster in achieving our carbon neutrality goals. Thank you for your attention. I wish you a very good conference.
Yes, thank you, Bruno. Here you have the content of the meeting, and we will start with Karen Scrivener. Karen, we are very pleased to welcome you. Karen Scrivener is well known from the sector. She is from École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, and we are very pleased to have. You will do it together, Thomas? Okay, it was a surprise. Then together with Thomas, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Bruno, for hosting us. I mean, this is really a great setup. Honestly, we could not dream better. Pardon, Karen, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Really, I'm rude. I'm a rude French, you know that.
No.
So Karen is with us on. I don't know if we need to present Karen still, but there is one thing which I would like to highlight. You've been nominated recently as in the Council of the Energy Transition at the United Nations level.
Right.
One of the 10 top prestigious, I think, scientific on the climate transition. Congratulations for this.
Merci. Well, thank you. Sorry, I was speaking English. Okay.
Karen, before we start, I mean, I wanted to have this little dialogue because I think it's interesting to have actually a view of what the industry does, on a view of what's the academic, on the reality, on you are a little bit for me the authority in what we are doing. You know, at industry level, we very often say the product is essential. We have an essential product, backbone of the modern society, etc. I have seen you've published on YouTube a very interesting video. You called it the myth buster of carbon change. Can you tell us a little bit on this and why you think that this product is indeed essential?
Yes, I mean, you know, I feel I spend a lot of my time trying to, you know, show people what are the misconceptions in this field. You know, everybody starts from this point of view that cement and concrete emits about 8% of CO2, but this is only because of the very large amount we produce. So this graph here we're just putting together for a paper shows you all materials in terms of mass, volume, and CO2. And this is all materials, but the vast majority, something like 3/4, is coming from construction. I mean, certainly all the concrete and all the bricks. So, you know, that gives you an idea. And you can see very clearly that for this huge amount, the CO2 emissions from the concrete are relatively modest. And that's borne out also on this graph on the left, where you can see intrinsically in terms of embodied energy and embodied CO2, they have some of the lowest footprints possible. But we shouldn't be complacent because we can go further, but we have to go further in a realistic way. So I think if you put the next slide, you know, we have to realize what we have on Earth. The composition of the Earth is fixed. We're not going to change that. Just 8 elements: oxygen, silicon, aluminium, iron, calcium, sodium, potassium, magnesium. This is 98% of the Earth's crust. We're hearing every day about the problems we have sourcing rare earths and things like that. So we can't possibly make cements out of things like lithium and nickel and all these kind of things. And then if we look at these elements, well, in fact, the alkalis, they're too highly soluble, so they never will solidify. Because the basic principle by which cement works, the stuff dissolves like sugar dissolves in your coffee, but then you get new combinations of things which precipitate out solids. And there the problem is the iron and the magnesium are too insoluble. So, you know, a lot of people are looking at magnesium compounds now. I don't see that working anytime soon. And even if it does work, it's not going to protect reinforcement. So we come down to really a system of just 3 oxides. That's just incredible. It's just incredible that we're considering the whole composition of the Earth, and we come down to 3 oxides that really can give us cement. So it's no surprise, and you know, I could go on about the geology, but please go and watch the YouTubes because I know we haven't got much time. You know, the fact we come with this Portland cement, it's just an inevitable consequence of the composition of the Earth and the geology of the Earth. And we shouldn't imagine that there's going to suddenly come some miracle solution which is going to replace it. So, you know, virtually every day there's a story in the press, you know, some startup in the US is going to get all their calcium from Basalt. Well, yes, you can get calcium from basalt. There's two slight problems. First of all, the process costs probably 20 times as much as making Portland cement today. And even if we have to have carbon capture and storage, cement is not going to be as expensive as that, the conventional route. Second problem is 80% of the material is not calcium. And what are you going to do with it? You're going to have mounds of slag heaps everywhere for the stuff you can't use? You know, we really have to be practical. And, you know, people just cannot believe the amounts of nonsense ideas out there. But, you know, on the positive side, and I think Thomas is going to talk more about that, we have got a lot of things we can do. So, you know, if we just take the different steps, the concrete in the construction, the cement in the concrete, and the clinker in the binder, just these 3 steps together, we can probably start to save 70%. You know, this is non-negligible. It's huge, but we have to find ways to implement in practice. We have to find ways to get the industry together. And then at the end, we're going to have some gap we have to fill, maybe with something like carbon capture and storage. But, you know, we need to also work on that gap now, because that's going to be the challenge. So, you know, that's sort of some of the myths. The final one I really want to point out is, you know, we're sitting here in Paris. We're part of the global north. We put together these figures on looking at the historic and the future evolution of cement use. And you see, since I was born, the global north has hardly changed. It's just hovered around here. What's been the big game changer in the last 3 decades has been China. But now they've built everything. They're consuming about 5 times as much cement as we do in other parts of the world, and their consumption is going to go down dramatically. So where we've got to look is in all these other regions now, because that's where it's going to happen. And if we can't also find solutions that can be used in those countries, then, you know, we have a problem. So, Thomas, back to you. I mean, you know, I know that the GCCA is really conscious of all of this, and your companies have really, you know, signed up to doing something. So perhaps you can explain more about that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Karen. So maybe a few words on GCCA first. I mean, what we are. So we are an association of cement producers, cement and concrete producers. We represent about 80% of the world of production of cement in all the continents of the planet. Basically, 80% outside China, and we have also some key Chinese manufacturers. You know, China is 50% of the world consumption. And the interesting thing is that we really have a lot of people, and we are getting more and more attractive. Although we put ourselves, you know, strong challenge in the decarbonization. So you see, last year we had 8 members more. Already in January, I have 1 sign up, and I have a few more down the line. Interesting is we also partner with National Cement Association. So like we do now with France Ciment, we have really this dialogue. How do you leverage global discussions with local realities, right? And that's really important. Not only in Europe, not only in North America, but also on particularly in the global south, and I'm going to come back with that. So what are the people in common? And that's what you say, Karen. We have in common that, you know, there is this goal of decarbonization. So there is really a strong motto on decarbonization. And in fact, as you say, we believe that the world needs concrete, that the infrastructure on people around us are saying that. I mean, the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Gutierrez, say it in his message. He say, well, it's essential to the modern life, and it's essential to the development of the world. On the development of the world, it's 80% outside of the north. So the question is, what do we do also in these areas, in these countries, and in development? So together with the members, actually the members themselves have produced this roadmap, where we see that we have started from 1990 with some solutions that are existing, and the idea is to continue with this solution. So it's not that we stop doing what we've been doing, and that works. So all the things related to decarbonization of the built environment, decarbonization on the product. You know, we say better build, less concrete in construction, less cement in concrete, etc. These are things that function. So the roadmap is the full value chain. We start in construction, right? And you see we have identified 7 technologies from construction down to clinker productions, which all together will lead us to a net zero situation by 2050, with an intermediate target in 2030, as we should have, which is minus 20% in cement and minus 25% in concrete. And the question here is, how do we advance all these technologies, and how do we work forward to progress all these technologies? And again, all at the same time. It's not that we want to stop everything and work only on carbon capture, for example. We need to work on many different things, such as. So just to illustrate, I mean, we have all the discussion on design and construction, and we need to have that discussion. We need to be part of the discussion, understand what can we do and what can we do better. We have, of course, the way we industrial ready mix, right? I mean, when you go in the south, you see these bags open on the waste of product in the dosing that you have. And certainly we can have a much better way of producing the concrete in ready stations. You have the discussion on product. You know, how do we reduce the clinker factor? And I have a question for Karen specifically on that in one second. Of course, the circularity is important in the production of clinker. All the circularity with the waste, all the development that we can do. Getting also access to green electricity. That's probably not a problem in the north, but this is really an issue in Global South. You know, we need to think of that, especially when we come also with carbon capture. This requires additional energy. And the last part is the recarbonation. So in this, there is actually two things where, Karen, I mean, you have some involvement. Maybe you tell us a bit more. The first one is your studies on calcined clay, and then you'll tell us more maybe about the sustainable building center that you are creating.
Thank you, Thomas. So, I mean, you know, I think most people have heard by now about LC3. This is a new cement, but the important thing, it's very much in the logic of what we've been doing already. So for decades, we've been using things like fly ash and slag as substitutes. The issue now is that, well, the issue already is we don't have that much slag and fly ash compared to the amount of cement we need. Slag, yes, you can put in very large amounts of slag, like 70%, but on a worldwide basis, we only have 8% slag compared to cement production. So if you prescribe high slag in your product, you're just taking it out of somebody else's product because nearly all that slag is already used. So where can we go? You know, we have to find new substitute materials. And this is the logic of LC3 because, you know, it actually was known for quite a long time that calcined clay, I mean, it's been known for over 100, well, since Roman times even, that clay becomes very active pozzolan if you heat it up at a much lower temperature than clinker. And what's new in LC3 is that if we put this together with limestone, the two actually react together, and that way we can go to very high levels of substitution, 50% or even more. So this is dramatic in the sense that it really can totally extend this logic of substituted cements. You know, this was stagnating the last 15, 20 years. Now, if we introduce calcined clays into the mix, we can, on a worldwide scale, we can save another like 400 to 800 million tons of CO2 per year. And this could account for easily 20%, 30% of all the cement and concrete emissions. So it's huge. As I say, it's not enough on its own. And this is really then why we've now created this Center for Worldwide Sustainable Construction. I'm sorry it's mostly in French, but we are in Paris here. And EPFL is a French-speaking university in some part. But here the idea is that we've got to get the whole industry working together. We've got to get the architects, the designers, the constructors, the cement makers working together. And we've got to have research to find ways to facilitate that. Because while the technologies are there, they're not being applied, and we can facilitate that process. For example, we were talking earlier today about having good metrics for life cycle analysis. This depends on the digital revolution. And we want to, particularly the worldwide in this is extremely important because, as I said earlier, that's where most construction is going to take place. So we have to partner with institutions, with people in these countries. Our first partners will be University of Cape Town and Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, but we hope to go much further, to be able to have student exchanges with them, to really build capacity, because this is where things are going to happen in the future, to work with organizations like the UN, to work with companies, like many of you in this room, and professional associations. So that's all about our new center. But coming back to you, Thomas, because I'm sure we should wrap this up. Maybe people want to ask some questions. But where is GCCA going next?
I do have a couple of slides on we need to go fast. That's the problem to do a dialogue with a professor, right? This somehow unbalanced. That's fine. Now, the question is, what the industry is doing on how do we actually transfer or transmit this vision of a net zero on this possibility of having net zero concrete into reality. And there, what the GCC has done with the help of all these members, we have made what we call this net zero accelerator. So this was quite revolutionary at the time. By now, you have a lot of net zero accelerator for everything. But at the time, we were probably the first one. And there, it was basically doing three things. One was we wanted to partner with all the national cement association on going in each country to understand how do we play these numbers, this technology in reality in the respective countries, right? I mean, we talk about geology, we talk about calcine clay, for example, we talk about slag. I mean, the world is uneven with the spread of these materials all over. So understand what can be done locally in the respective geographies. Same thing with carbon capture, same thing with alternative fuels or the usage of waste. The world is uneven. Let's see what we need to do. And doing that also understanding how can we advance these technologies really on the country, talking about regulatory framework, regulatory change. We need to have a transformation in the regulatory framework. We know that. I mean, starting from the standards for the product to enable low carbon products to get into the market, but also talking about circularity. It will always be cheaper to dig a hole, put the waste, and close the hole. I mean, if you don't have a regulation on waste, you don't have a possibility for circular economy. It doesn't exist, right? So regulation is fundamental to work, and these are the type of things we are discussing with our members there. And they're also identifying already in the field, including Global South projects, making sure that people have the elements to discuss and to discuss business. At the end of the day, the transition is also a question of business, making sure that all these technologies will create value, because if it's not the case, it will not happen. We are in an economic world. So these things need to get return on investment, and we need to engage with government and understand, okay, what do I need to make that investment to work? We had a fantastic discussion with the Canadians. The Canadians said, if you guys are not able to invest into the project, we need to revise the legislation. And there was a ping-pong game between the Cement Association in Canada and the industry in Canada on a specific project. I mean, the project is actually a Heidelberg material project in Edmonton, to make sure that this project is bankable and to make sure that there will be return on investment on the project. And that's, we believe, from the business, the right attitude. But on top of that, what we are doing, we are also trying to leverage, and I will finish with this, the global initiative. And that's very important because, we are a global association. And we are involved in these United Nations things, different multilateral breakthrough thing, like you have breakthrough building, which is the one we are here. We have also the breakthrough cement. We have the industrial transformation accelerator. I mean, many things. The question is, how can these things be helpful at local level, right? And this is an example of what was produced by UNIDO. UNIDO, they believe is what they call the chain reaction, right? So we come with a roadmap, we have our metrics, we have our numbers, we have our commitments, and then we discuss, okay, how do I make these things work? Changing and creating the favorable conditions. Demand signals. UNIDO has produced, this famous, with IDDI, this famous procurement commitment on demand signals defining what is low carbon concrete, low carbon steel, right? And these are the type of things that are game changer in the market, because this will create demand for the material. And this will create then something which is bankable, and that will de facto attract investors into the business and make sure that we can scale up and roll out the technologies. And this is fundamental on each of these technologies. And today we really say each of the technologies, right? To make sure that we progress and to make sure that we have done. I finished with that. I did say that we are involved in many global multilateral initiative. It's a little bit barbarian, but that's helpful. And our challenge is to make sure that we connect the dots between the global commitment, the global reality, and what is happening in the ground in all the countries. We said resilient, we said decarbonize, and we said scalable. These are the fundamental three themes that we are working on with GCCA. I make a little bit of social media stuff, so please follow us. You can even join us if you're a cement company somewhere. Click it, you can register directly on the links. Thank you very much for that. And I'm closing, and I will welcome somebody on stage. Thank you very much. Thank you. No, I shake hands first.
Oh, sorry.
That's the end of the dialogue, right?
Thank you very much for this overview with the key topics. We are really in the core of the priorities with the finance, the technology, and the regulation. And now we will welcome Pierre Bernard from Ekiom, CRH Group, to illustrate the decarbonization roadmap with one of France Ciment members, Ekiom. Pierre.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have the pleasure to do the... Sorry, yeah, I can do it. So I have the pleasure to do that presentation for Ekiom. So for those who are not familiar with the French market, Ekiom is a building material producer. We are producing cement, aggregate, and ready-mix. We have 1,500 employees, 500 in each branches. So I'm in charge of cement operation. We are producing about 3 million tons a year of cement. So how do we tackle challenges, low carbon building materials? I'm going to speak more in general about our decarbonization roadmap. So what are we talking about? We heard that previous presentation about concept LC3, CCS, and so on. We are really working on that on the field with our partner, with our stakeholders, with our shareholders too. And we are talking about what? We are talking about decarbonization. That's a common goal from everyone we are talking to. Local communities, region, state, Europe. I mean, we are sharing that goal at every level, and we are going through some new projects, environmental inquiry, environmental permit, and we can see that from the local communities up to the European level, everybody is willing to work on that side. We are talking about construction needs. Still, we believe in cement, we believe in concrete, and our partners in the construction industry are still willing to build safe and durable buildings. We are talking about regulation. I'm going to speak about the RE 2020, which is a French regulation on the buildings, new buildings, and we're going to see how it works. And we are going to talk about the industry transition. Of course, we're talking about LC3, calcined clay fly ashes, but we see that there are incremental improvements, but there will going to be disruptive improvement too. So first, let's speak about the regulation in France. So France has put in place a regulation called RE 2020. To summarize it, as far as building material producer, provider, in fact, it's a regulation that is limiting the CO2 emitted during the fabrication of the building materials that are going to be used in a new building. You have steps. So you had a limit in 2022, 25, 28, 2031. And over this period of time, the CO2 emitted by this during the fabrication of this material has to be reduced by 30%. I think this is a good regulation. Everybody we are talking to thinks it's a good regulation. There are decreasing threshold steps over the years. In our opinion, okay, it's boosting the need for decarbonization. In our opinion, okay, up to 2028, we're good. Then from there, we need some disruptive steps from 2028 to 2031. When we are talking to partner or to stakeholders, some communities want to speed up that process. In our opinion, it's going to be tricky to speed up the last two steps. We are not convinced that the industry the materials industry and the construction industry would be able to absorb a faster pace. What are we doing in the field? So in Echium, we modified our portfolio. We have the Echium R portfolio. R stands for respect, responsibility, and CO2 reduction. We have 4 categories of concrete, and among them we have the low concrete, ultra low, very low concrete, and ultra low concrete. And we are proud to say that this year at least 50% of our concretes are going to be very low and ultra low. That's the target for our concrete business this year. How do we get there? As we were mentioning, most of the CO2 emission in the cement, in the concrete, is coming from the clinker, from the cement part. So Echium has the best clinker ratio on the French market among the traditional cement players. We have a clinker ratio in our cement, in average, below 65%, the best one on the market. And we've been using, since many years, more than 30 years, we've been using slag. We are still planning to decrease that clinker ratio and to improve our environmental footprint. Our target by 2030 is to reach 58%, so we are not yet at 50%, but 58%. And despite the slag scarcity that may happen in Europe due to some transformation in the slag industry, the use of calcined clay, the use of fly ash, the better use of limestone, for instance, should help us to reach that level. The other lever we are using is alternative fuels. We again have the best average alternative fuel usage in the French cement player. We are at above 65% of alternative fuels. We have one of our companies, Sapphire, is supplying, sorting, processing alternative fuels for more than 30 years. Our goal is to reach 80% by 2030. We're going to do incremental improvement in our existing kilns, and one of the big steps for us is the next project, the K6 project. This is our big investment for us, for Echium in France. It's more than 300 million euros investment. It's a new kiln in one of our plants. This new kiln is more efficient, 20% more efficient as far as energy and CO2. It's going to allow us to reach an average 80% of alternative fuels. And on this kiln, our goal is not to use any fossil fuel anymore. And the main thing on this project is, okay, we are building a new kiln, but this kiln has been engineered to be able to be coupled with a CCS system. It's going to be able to run as a traditional kiln or as an oxy-fuel kiln and then be connected to a CCS system. This CCS system is a project we've been working on for 3-4 years. We are working with partners, and this project has been so far funded by the European Union. We received a fund of 153 million euros, but it is not approved yet. We are still working on it. We were mentioning before that we need to find a financial balance. We still need to find the financial balance. We are working with our partners to find this balance on the finance side, on the value chain, on the liability side. There is a lot of work, a lot of partners to work with. You need to capture, you need to transport, you need to transfer, you need to store that CO2, and that's a game changer in our industry. So in order to summarize everything I said, I would say there are 2 groups of improvements. There are incremental improvements. We are talking about better concrete, cement, better standards too in France. So concrete, right now we are proposing to work on the water to cement ratio in the concrete. We should be able to improve the CO2 footprint on that. Better cement, as we were mentioning, using less clinker, using more alternative fuel and more SCM. And better standards. Some actors are willing to change very fast the standards. Still, we are cautious to make safe and reliable materials. So we need to keep that in mind. So these are the incremental improvements we are working on. On the disruptive one, of course, as I showed you, our roadmap includes a CCS by 2030. This CCS needs some support, I think, from the administration on one side. There are huge investments at stake. There are huge commitment for a company like us. And so far, the financial structure and the financial model is not validated yet. We need a tight regulation. Up to now, companies outside of Europe were not subject to CO2 emission or CO2 quotas. And the fact that Europe has decided to implement a CBAM is encouraged players like us to invest in a CCUS system and to invest in a kiln in France. So this CBAM system, where producers outside of Europe have also to comply with the CO2 part, is creating a fair level playing field. So it's helping us to commit to that roadmap. And still, we need a high level of commitment from our customers. We need market support because things are going to change, and it's going to change for everybody, our customers and our customers' customers. So everybody needs to understand that and to buy into that new system, I would say. So this was short. I hope it was interesting, but this is our roadmap so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. To respect the 10 minutes of presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. We will have a Q&A session. We will now welcome Sergio Tortelli, Heidelberg Materials, Product Directors for EvoZero, the net zero carbon captured products.
Bonjour, merci pour la présentation. That's all my French, so I can switch to English. Okay, so thank you for being here and for this opportunity. I know Professor Scrivener seems quite a lot. It's really an honor for me to be here. So we're all here because we know that decarbonization is already really a clear target for all the industry. Now I think that it's interesting for us to show what we can do to walk the talk, to make it really happen in reality, not on the paper, but really in reality. As you know, Heidelberg Materials has now, since quite some years, the reduction of the CO2 in the core of this strategy. So it's not anymore a nice to have as for all other cement players in the industry. It's really something that stands at the core, and that stands at the core like having 10 million tons of CO2 budgeted to be carbon captured by 2030, which is actually a huge amount of CO2. And just to be practical, we all speak about buildings, we'll speak about sometimes at least real estate. If we take a look to the usual, let's say, 6-story residential building, which is the impact in terms of embodied carbon of the concrete and then of the cement for sure, we speak about more or less 50% of the embodied carbon that we can tackle by reducing for sure the impact and possibly going down to zero, and I'll show you how in, let's say, in a few seconds. And that's something that is already significant because it means that we, as cement sector, have the power to reduce about half of the net embodied carbon of a building that is built as such. Then, coming to, let's say, some practical points. For sure, carbon capture is one solution, but reducing as much as possible the CO2 is the first step. And this is something that we can do, as the previous presenters showed, that we can for sure use alternative fuels, we can go for different supplementary cementitious material. But the point is that if we really want to go down to zero, the only way at the moment is via carbon capture, and that's it. So we can go as low as possible with the cement, but still we need something else to capture what is rest, to capture what is the hard to abate part, at least as such that we still use limestone for making cement. So what does it mean in terms of making it tangible? This is our cement plant in Brevik in Norway, and is the first cement plant that will be running a CCS equipment at a scale, starting from the next year, so in 2025 actually. And as you see, it means that basically we have to rebuild, let's say, a part of the plant, because capturing the carbon, the CO2, is actually one part of the story. But the other part of the story is then to manage the CO2 and to make something out of it. In this case, what we need for sure is the piping, I mean the connection between the part where the CO2 is captured and the tank where the CO2 can be stored. And then what we need is a ship, for example, to take the CO2 from the storage location to the site where then can be reinjected in a gas field under the North Sea, under, let's say, 2.5 kilometers below the sea level. So, as you see, carbon capture is not an easy technology, but is something that is actually needed really to go down to zero. And this is something that, as you can see, takes a lot of infrastructure, takes a lot of technicalities, takes a lot of expertise. And are we doing this alone? Honestly not. We're really leveraging on a lot of cross-industry partnership, like for example, via Northern Lights, via carbon capture by Aker and Gasnova. I mean, we are taking the technology that has been used since a couple of decades in oil and gas industry and using this in the cement. This means that this kind of technology, I mean the storage of the CO2 in this way, is safe because it has been tested since more than 2 decades out there from the oil and gas industry. But the great part now is that we're really putting this at a scale for the cement sector. That is really a huge step forward. And just to give you an idea of what does it mean for a cement plant to revamp it in that way, you see what happens when we put in place a part of the absorber. So this is actually, let's say, the big filter, okay, that takes out the CO2, leaving the minus side. You see, it's basically as high as the tower of the kiln. And it is being now put in place, that part, and in these days actually we are putting in place the stack that goes on top, so that at the end of the day this guy is as high as the Big Ben in London, or as high as 1/3 of the Tour Eiffel. Okay, so just to give you some idea of what does it mean. And not only the process is innovative, but also how we can bring it to the customer is innovative, because you know, CO2 is a global issue. So the CO2 emitted in Paris is the same of the CO2 emitted in London, in Italy, whatever it is. So the point is, we can for sure produce carbon capture cement in Breivik and deliver it physical, as it always happens in our market. But we can also think about not delivering the physical cement, but delivering the benefits of the carbon capture. I.e., you build a building in Paris, for example, you can make the estimation of the CO2 that comes from the embodied carbon from the building materials in concrete. And then you can reabsorb the same amount of the CO2 in Breivik using the carbon capture, and you can be delivered via a certification. I'll show you in a second what does it mean for the certification. So that in the same way, you can still capture the CO2 without the physical need of shipping the cement from Breivik to France, for example. I know it's something totally new in our industry. Is not so new, let's say, in general on the market in terms of other commodities, because if we speak about this way of doing, for example, electricity market is something that is already doing like from some years on. So it is really a matter of shifting our mindset in the new reality that will be happening anyway in the next years. So we'll be ready or not, will really be up to us. The point is that from the cement sector and from the cement plants, we are really moving in that direction. And this is something that we have to deal with. Making then sure about what does it mean to have this kind of approach. It means also that we are not doing this by ourselves in terms of technology, but also in terms of assurance, in terms of certification. So there is this 3-layer, let's say, of assurance given to the customer. The first one is given by the DNV, that is a well-recognized certification body in the Nordics country that has audited our methodology with, for sure, a positive review. Then there is EPD Norway, that is another well-known body that is agreeing with us about, for sure, putting the CO2 saving in the footnote of the EPD for the first period, and then to put the CO2 saving actually in the actual number of the EPD, for sure, for the cement produced in Breivik. And then the third layer that is not, let's say, last but not least, is the blockchain. Because when we deliver, let's say, the virtual attribution of the CO2 benefits to the customer, what we will do is we also delivering a certificate that will be put on the blockchain in a transparent way, so that using the immutability of the blockchain, using the transparency of the approach, we can make the customer sure about what has been delivered, we can make the customer sure that there is no double counting, and we can make the customer sure that what they are getting is really what they need. Again, it's a shift in our approach, it's a different mindset, but nevertheless, if we speak about the blockchain, it's not just about crypto or Bitcoin, it's something really more, it's a technology. And believe it or not, it will be for sure having a huge impact also in our industry in the next coming years. Not just for the certification, but also for several other things that will be coming. In a nutshell, what we are doing now is that we are making all the steps, let's say, needed to be ready in the next year to deliver on the market, something that is already well known to our customers, I mean, cement and concrete, but that at the same time can gather together the benefits of having a net zero CO2 embodied carbon between. So it's something that does also imply, last but not least, an approach that is not just for Breivik in this case, but at a global level. We started the presentation speaking about the 10 million tons of CO2. Well, you cannot just do it with one plant. You need, for sure, more than one plant, as you see, all around Europe and also in US and Canada. So we were speaking about Edmonton a few minutes ago. So this is actually what is going on. And as you see, it's really an approach that is taking care of all the best available technologies that can be used in these days and in the future. Sometimes at the demo level, sometimes at the full scale, as it is for Breivik. But being really a global player in the cement industry, we believe that really this is the only way we can do to keep ourselves in the industry and to keep our business safe for the next decades. Given this, thank you so much. And
Thank you very much. Now we will welcome Mr. Roberts from Holcim Group. And we will go further in the value chain with the presentation of the circular economy on the building.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan, and I work for Holcim. I'm the head of sustainable construction and circular economy. I realize that this is a English-speaking event, but I'm going to be speaking Australian, so please bear with me. We'll see how we go. So today, I'm going to be talking about a specific project on recycled concrete and have a little bit more of a discussion on CCUS, which I think we've heard in the last two. Up on the screen, you can see this is our framework for a sustainable built environment. So we're really focused on 4 key areas: building better with less, making the buildings that are built more sustainable, circular construction, and at the very start, green operations. So making sure that we take care of what we do as a company. And the two on the left will be the two that I'll be focusing on today. And so we're going to start with the case study here in France on circular construction using recycled concrete. Now, as a company, we're very much leaning into to circularity, particularly with CDM, so the reuse of buildings to recover them, recycle them, and build new from old. Now, the approach that we're taking to CDM and circularity is EcoCycle. Now, this is the brand that we've put to the recycling technology that we use to recover CDM, process it and valorize it into new materials. Now, the concept is a technology platform because to do this well and to do it at scale, it's really about a number of different pieces of technology that you have to combine together to do it effectively. And they could start with the processing equipment that you might have at your different plants within your operations, but also digital technologies like material passports, mapping systems to understand when buildings are coming down within the right distance of another building that needs to be built in a processed area that would be able to handle the stored materials. There's a number of different types of technologies that you need to do it well. And for us, this is the EcoCycle brand. And when we put it into a product, so when there's EcoCycle inside any of our products, what we're doing is requiring a minimum of 10% recycled construction and demolition materials in the product. Now, just to clarify, where we can go more, we go more. And we know with aggregates, you're going to be able to have quite a high content of recycled construction and demolition material. With concrete, you're going to be able to have quite a high amount, but probably less. And we also know with cement, you're going to have a lower amount. So the approach and the reason for the 10% is we want to not tackle a niche subject, but we want to really grow at scale and make circular construction and the use of old buildings to build new the norm within the industry. And so that's why the 10% is the minimum, but wherever we can go higher, we do. Which brings me to the case study we want to talk about first, which is the Ressigny project in France. in the suburbs of Paris, where we are today. And this is quite a unique project. So, done last year, quite a large social housing project, partnered with a local, a very prominent local French developer. And what's unique about it, it is the first use of 100% recycled concrete. 25 MPa, about 1,600 cubic meters. And just to clarify, when I say recycled concrete, that includes recycled cement. So very innovative, very new. And it was done through a partnership. And I think it's worth noting that that's how you get these strong outcomes, when you want to show what can be done. If we want to show that circular construction and 100% recycling of materials is possible, and to then encourage, and I apologize, I'm stepping through the light, and to encourage policymakers to make the difference, then you really need strong partnerships to come up with an idea, come up with a common goal, a clear ambition of what you want to succeed, and then set milestones for that goal. This one being circular construction. So the partner was Sequence, which is under the Group Action Lodgement, which I'm sure many people here would be familiar with. And as I mentioned, when we look behind the concrete, probably the most innovative part of this project is the clinker. So in the start of 2022, at our Altkirch facility in France, we did, I would say, well, we did a world first, but what I would say is probably one of the most interesting from a technical perspective, achievements within cement. So, you know, really we talk about substitution and we talk about lowering the clinker factor through use of other materials. But if we could get to the stage where we're able to reuse concrete over and over again in cement, just like we do with concrete, this is probably a pretty powerful lever to how we're going to decarbonize. Now, we made 2,000 tons of the material. There's a lot of text on the screen, so I'm not going to go through everything because I want to be quick. But I think the main thing is that it was 100% recycled clinker using conventional methods of manufacture, but also using materials that weren't just CDM. These materials were taken from other parts of the value chain. We made 2,000 tons of it, and then we worked with the EcoCycle technology to bring in as much of the recycled CDM as we could into the concrete. And where possible, some of it was taken from the exact same site. We used 2,000 tons of recycled aggregates specifically for this project, separating both the aggregate, the sand, and the fines. And then we took those aggregates and fines and combined them with conventional recycled water recovery. Now, there's, you know, this is a process recovery, so it's not taking material, it's not taking wastewater from outside. It's recovering its pre-consumer content. But essentially, all the materials within the project ended up being recycled 100%, showing it can be done. And so what we would hope is this becomes the norm. We would hope that everything becomes 100%. But I think realistically, like was mentioned before, we need to do things safe and we need to do things reliably. So the idea is to show that it can be done and it can be done today. But what we'd probably expect and ask for from policymakers is to allow the standards to move quicker and do what we know we can comfortably do today. 20%, 40%, 50% is clearly a reality, and we're doing it all over the world. So I'll move on quickly to carbon capture and utilization and storage. I'm not going to go on too much about this because I think we've heard about it, but I will cover our approach. And so you can see we have our roadmap, like everyone has their roadmap, SBTi validated, near and far term. But we've got 44% in our roadmap allocated to other technologies, novel technologies, which include CCUS. So it's important for us that we understand how we're going to do that in a mature fashion. You can't just put it in a roadmap and then think you're going to get there with commitments. We need to map out where we're going to put projects, what's the framework that we're going to use for CCUS, and I think more importantly, what's the CC part, and then understanding where's the U, where's the S, and where's it applicable. So for us, our projects really span 4 pathways. The first one is conversion utilization, so repurposing for producing fuels, products like plastics, synthetic plastics and the like. The second one is mineralization, So different types of CO2 absorption, and I think many of you would be aware of this type of technology and probably aware of a Neustadt is one that we work with recycling CDM. So you can start to combine CO2 captured mineralization with circular construction to find benefits and synergies there. Market utilization, which is looking at particularly agriculture and the food and beverage industries. And then lastly, storage. So we get to the S. Now, like we saw before, we're pretty active on what we're doing here, and we're pretty confident as well. So we have over 50 projects globally in the pipeline for CCUS, but particularly we have 6 projects that we're committing to capture 5 million tons of CO2 by 2030. So that's each year, not cumulative, and we're confident because a number of those, each one of those 6 that we're allocating have EU innovation funds in a co-funding joint venture there. So it's not all of our projects that we're going to get there, we'll get more, but just from those 6, 5 million tons per year by 2030. And you can see the different projects indicated by the flag on the right on the European map of the projects, and yeah, Germany, Belgium, France, Croatia, Greece, Poland. However, one last thing that we're looking at is you can't just look through a carbon lens at everything. And I think we're particularly bad at this in the built environment when we use a carbon lens for nature. We look at, we look at nature with a carbon lens when really it's not. In that aspect, you've got biodiversity, you've got water, you've got health that's attached. So if we look at carbon capture a little bit broader, it's probably a more mature way of seeing what needs to be done, seeing the risks to both the company, but the planet and in the economy. And it's also probably a better way to take away some skepticism that people may have. If we can look at it at a more holistic approach and talk about what are the benefits up front, it's a more mature way of having that discussion. And so for us, responsible carbon capture really looks at minimizing any energy consumption. So it's moving emissions from scope 1 to scope 3 in carbon accounting. That's probably not something that's going to be well received. So we want to make sure that we're actually minimizing those emissions. Water withdrawal is a huge one for carbon capture. So we need to make sure of what type of water, where we're going to get it. Is it in water risk areas? Is it going to have a negative effect on communities? Respecting those communities in many different levels, whether that be economic, environmental, and limiting scope 3 emissions as well. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Now we will welcome Isabelle Spiegel from Vinci. You are in charge of implementing the group's environmental ambition within all entities, and we are happy to listen to your views and priorities on those topics.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to speak about e-fuel. No, the focus will be on low carbon concrete, but you can guess that thanks to the usage part of the CCUS and the fact that we operate 71 platform for airports, we are pretty much interested about any kind of technology we can help decarbonize also the traffic from the concession. Just to I guess it was the wrong button. Okay. Moving further. Yeah, perfect. Just to let you know a bit where we are coming. So glad to be here and have this position of representing one part of the value chain. We decided at Vinci to take a much more proactive approach on environment already 4 years ago or 4 years and a half ago. Because usually what we are doing is deliver what our clients are wanted from us. So we used to be able to deliver on environmental performance when the client is willing to, but there were not enough clients willing to really embed environmental criteria. And clearly, even a lower number of clients able to pay for the cost of an extra environmental performance. So we decided to indeed accelerate a bit ourselves, take a proactive approach and look at our impact, negative impact, and which kind of action we can take to reduce. So you see it's both it's 3 topics: climate, circular economy, and natural environment. I'm going to focus on climate and the decarbonization because that's one of the key area definitely that we have in common. And you see just a picture of challenge, internal challenge that we launched so in 2021, so already 3 years ago. The big winner from this award was GCCA, our low carbon concrete. And just so coming back a bit on that, when we launched this award, we said we now. So every single one within Vinci, we need to act now for the environment. And every single action counts because there's also a lot of technologies already available. And one first step is already to implement what is available on the shelf, on the market, etc., etc. But indeed, we need to go further and boost also innovation. Our key targets in terms of CO2 reduction, it's a reminder here, but just when you look, so we set up targets on our scope 1 and 2 emission, apply to ourselves all what we can do to decarbonize our own activities, but also commit to work with you guys, in fact, to decarbonize also our scope 3 emissions, so the one from our own value chain. And if you look at the size of our scope 3 emissions, concrete itself, the implementation of the concrete within our project represents 2 million tons of CO2. That's 5% of our scope 3. So that's why we can now focus on this one specifically. So we set up an extra objective to follow an action plan, which is to implement 90% of low carbon concrete within all our projects. So that's mainly for Vinci Construction, but everywhere on the planet by 2030. All our ambitions are here. And with this brand, GCCA. 3 key levers in this action plan. The first one is first to implement the right quantities of material. So you won't always be happy with that, but let's start by that, making sure that we apply the right quantities of material. The market is still good. We still need to implement a lot of new projects or to develop a lot of new projects so we can optimize the quantities. Second one is where, well, we cannot work without you, is really all the process, all the work that you are doing on the fuel, etc., to decarbonize the process itself of producing the cement and specifically the clinker. And the third pillar is substitution. So it's also something that we are working definitely directly with you as well, how to substitute, so put less clinker within the concrete. And you see that CCUS is not on the table. It's probably a 4th lever that we do not want to activate too early in the process because also we are at a stage where we say we have to become much more proactive. And it starts by, well, implementing what already exists, okay, and preparing the huge scaling up of indeed the low carbon concrete. I'm showing this to you not to detail every single part of it, but the way we also put everybody on the same track, on the same path of talking about low carbon concrete within Vinci was to say, well, there's not only one product, there's a set of products, and we know that the performance is key in what we are building. So for paving a road or for a tower here in La Défense, etc., we need different quality of concrete. So we set up this scale for us to qualify the level of CO2, so the emission factors of a different category of low carbon concrete. It exists since a bit more than 3 years, and we haven't changed it since there. But I'm showing it to you also to be able to work together with you and to say, well, if we need to revisit at some point, to put it in a common framework, etc., happy to do so and happy to share this kind of methodology. that helped everybody to know that we are not talking only about one single thing, but indeed that's a bit more complex, and we love that because the way to really put the right performance material close to the usage of what wants the client, it's definitely our job. So we just adding up the environmental CO2 performance. And just another slide I wanted to share with you also today is in terms of substitution. So before taking this huge commitment to implement 90% of low carbon concrete, we needed to make sure, well, what is the realistic part of it and what is the ambitious part of it. And you see a few question marks. We don't have a crystal ball indeed to make sure that we are able to find the right level of materials everywhere. But what is clear is that we still need all kind of material to achieve that. So we still need some clinker, definitely, some limestone thinner, LC3 or L plus C3, etc., etc. So we can have a lot of acronyms and denomination. But what is true as well is that when we set up this strategy at Vinci, we said, okay, it's also a strategy based on what we know, but it's going to be based on the availability of a resource. And the solutions here in Paris or in Africa or in Latin America, etc., are not the same. Okay, so we need to team up, and that's why we have a chance to be big. So we can team up with many different players to find the right resources, which fits with the previous slide that we showed. And our job, once we did this strategy, is this one, in fact. Our job is really to make sure that we are able to deliver. So depending on the different content, mix of materials, etc., which is the recipe of a concrete that we are going to purchase, is to make sure that we are able to deliver really for a project of a client. So we are focusing much more on how to make sure that we have the right methods. If we need to heat the concrete, well, we're going to do that, etc., etc. And I'm pleased to tell that it's moving. It's moving quite well according to our plans. But then it's a lot of effort. We need to work on some standardization change at some point. So it's done in France, for instance, for one part of the usage, looking at both technical performance and the environmental performance together. But it's also currently around 50 projects where Vinci can say, well, it has been made with low carbon concrete. 50, it's really not so many projects compared to the quantities of projects on which we are working. And we only can see that we have a very high level of standards of decarbonization. So the top ultra low carbon concrete, or in future the one which has a net zero footprint, for instance, for clients who have a specific fund. So it could be either an innovation fund or a sustainability fund. So we have two great cases in France, for instance, of clients like that, where we were able to experiment and to show on the project that high score in terms of decarbonization, it's achievable. But then we have also to deal with a lot of clients who are not so, I would say, aware yet of the technical plus environmental performance of the concrete to be able to buy it. So that's part of our challenge, but we definitely need to work together to achieve that. And again, we are moving from the first project where we implemented low carbon concrete was in l'Archipel, it's our headquarters, so here in La Défense in Paris, 3.5 years ago. And now I say to you 50 projects, including outside of Europe and UK. So meaning that it's starting to come, but we need to join forces to keep scaling up. So thanks a lot for your attention, and let's keep doing this together.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. Thank you to all speakers for being so sharp in time. and for sharing with us your projects and achievements. We propose to have a Q&A session, and I invite all speakers to come here on stage. Then we can start this Q&A session. And a small information, we will have a network, we can share a drink all together at the end of this Q&A session, just at the entrance of the conference room. Enough chairs? Yes? Okay, then if you have questions, Damien is here with a microphone. I am sure you have plenty of questions to ask because it was quite dense, all those presentations. Yes?
Hello, thanks a lot for all those presentations. Very, very interesting. And I have a question for Heidelberg, because you mentioned the mass balance approach. And I was just wondering how would it be certified and accepted for EPDs?
Yep. So if everyone is familiar with mass balance, basically what happens is that in a Breivik plant, we will be able to capture 50% of the CO2. And this is due to the fact that we are using the waste heat recovery from the kiln, so not using extra power, extra electricity to turn on for sure the plant. And this 50% will be then been allocated with a mass balance mechanism on a part of the production to have it net zero, while the other part of production will stay grey cement, let's say, we can call it that. So far, the discussion with EPD Norway is that they are okay using mass balancing, putting in the EPD nodes for, let's say, the first 6 months of production. Then, when the plant is, let's say, fully operational after a reasonable time, that could be like 6 months or 1 year, let's say, then the discussion are that will be put in the node, in the number of DPD, the mass balancing of the CO2 reduction. So far is a positive outcome we have for with the body. Thank you.
Hello, Anna Chiara Torciano, and I represent an investor in real estate called Sletto. So I have a question that regards our part of the value chain, the customers or the investors. How do you see demand for low embodied carbon in new buildings from the investor side, and is there a willingness to pay a green premium?
I can take the first shot. So currently the willingness to pay is still quite limited. So we have to make a lot of efforts, and that's what we are trying to do, because in fact we're trying to sell the product from the cement companies. Not alone, fortunately. But even for some tendering process, we're trying to come up with a low carbon alternatives, and sometimes we have to have even 2 low carbon options. So one which is a higher level of decarbonization and more expensive, and another one which is at the same cost. What can we deliver at the same cost? And that's still the tendency. It's changing slowly, but compared to 3 years ago, yes, we can have some discussion about the environmental performance, and I can find a good example of a first pioneering client or real estate investors indeed able to have an exemplary project. It's still not at scale. That's my point. Yeah.
Just was an additional column, because I think there is one thing important in that is, what do you call low carbon material? And that's one of the things we have been actually working with UNIDO, with this IDDI initiative, is to have actually a common definition for what we call low carbon concrete, and being able then to say, look, I mean, each sequence or each category of product corresponds to a band, if you want, and then to allocate and to decide what do you want to do and how will you boost this or that market. And I think in our specificity, there is something which is a bit complicated. It's that the near zero technology is very expensive. So there is somehow a gap between the low carbon, or I mean, I don't know if you go ultra low carbon where you position, we would have to reference to the UNIDO bonding, but you have really a gap between low carbon on near zero technology, right? And that's where we come with the things like Evo, where it's important to actually create the market space and where you ensure that products compete in categories of cost on systems that are consistent, coherent, right? And there we need to have actually the discussion on regulatory, because indeed, I mean, a real estate company will not necessarily come and say, well, I mean, unless somebody wants to do it because of goodwill. So that's a question that we have, and we hope that this type of discussion will actually trigger some reaction also from the market to say, well, I mean, there are things coming, maybe we should think about that. But this is part of the discussion we have on how we try to push the development of this type of materials on the planet, even not only in Europe.
And then if I can add, it's also a matter of where, because there are some markets like in the Nordics where already the market is ready in some way to go for this, let's say, premium. Other markets where it's not, let's say, the case, but is building up. So we're sure that the momentum will come. It's just a matter of when, not if, okay? But again, there are, let's say, some markets where it already is happening, let's say, quite a scale.
Something super quick, super simple. If you have a portfolio and you have a scope 3 target, low carbon concrete, even any way that you reduce the carbon, whether it's technically low carbon or reduced, is probably the cheapest way you'll reduce your scope 3, because there is a premium. It is harder to do. There's added costs, but the premium is not exponential. The premiums are quite modest, even for what we would term as low, ultra low. And compared with where you're going to get that anywhere else for an investor or a developer, if you have a scope 3 target formula you want to reduce, it's the cheapest, most cost-effective way to reduce your scope 3 emissions, because of the math, as Karen mentioned, and because of the quantity that you get a reduction for the price. So when you convert for abatement versus cost, it's pretty effective.
Chris Carroll. I'm a director at Arup in London, and I'm a designer. I'm from the design side. And the question is, I noticed on a lot of the 2050 decarbonisation trajectories, there's a kind of design efficiency block, and it varies from 15% to 20% to 22%. My question is whether that's ambitious enough, and especially in the context of the near term 2030, where we're looking to, in terms of the buildings we design, half the embodied carbon of them. So half things by 2030 within 7 years, which must mean using a lot less material resource in doing that. And so the question back is whether we're pushing that much, and whether you're supporting, as people who have a vested interest in selling materials, whether you're pushing back on that enough as well.
I'll take the first shot on maybe the very compliment if I say something, and I speak under the supervision of my director for construction, so I'll be careful. No, I want to push back a little bit the discussion on whether it's enough or not enough in reality, because the truth is, you know, we look at our roadmap, we say, okay, 22% of that, 10% of this, 36% of CCUS, etc. I mean, individually in this room, every one of you could agree on different number, right? So, I mean, this was a result of 200 people from the industry coming together, trying to understand what could be done in their local realities, you know, adding the realities as much as it can make sense. Big question on what China is doing, what is the actual status of China, etc., etc. So, at the end of the day, what is important in the roadmap is we say, look, we have 7 technologies, and we're going to push these 7 technologies because we understand that we will need these 7 technologies. No matter where, these 7 technologies will matter somewhere. Now, in a specific geography, you will certainly be able to do more. In another geography, it will be another level that will go more. I'm an economist at the beginning, and my view on that is let them compete. We will redo a roadmap probably in 5 years down the road, or maybe even earlier, and we will see where we stand. I mean, people say carbon capture costs too expensive, but we already see now the role of innovation and how much we can bring down the cost. I mean, you mentioned the project of LELAC. I mean, LELAC, they are coming with half the price in capture than what we see today. So let them compete. And my second question is then something to translate, to say, I'm talking to the constructor. What is more difficult to do? I mean, my impression sometimes is that the transformation of the building industry itself, and you had that in your roadmap actually, transform the way we build, is sometimes much more complicated to change the habits of the people than, you know, to take a material that is somehow a little bit more expensive or is a little. So maybe to you, I mean, what is more complicated? Because I see also in the developing countries, you know, how do we manage the transformation of the construction industry there?
Yeah, indeed. If it's only costing more, well, that's the point, but that's not the only burden, definitely. So I agree that we need to take everything at the design stage, and well, there are projects where we are the designer, or we can redesign and act on the design, and others where we can't. So the issue is there. Indeed, we have to apply the overall approach from the beginning. And even one burden is not only the habits to implement, you know, to pour the concrete, etc., but also the habits of running the tenders, for instance, with the different slots or lots, and a lot of fragmentation sometimes just is a burden for innovation, and think of it with a more global approach specifically. Like the quantities of materials, that's part of a design, and then after you cannot change any single thing. So yeah, that's complex because it's a lot of things, but I think we have to go on for the pioneering project, client, investors, etc., etc., because there is luckily willingness to change a bit the habits thanks to this kind of project. But then where we need also to join efforts is by showing really what has been done with this, even if it's only less than 10 examples, and well, get the scaling up thanks to this kind of project, definitely. And it's true as well that currently we are building, like we can see out of the window, the Link tower, one of the new tower in La Défense. The design was made 4 years ago, something like that. So meaning that we need also to take this time schedule of the project. So for building it's one, but for infrastructure is even sometimes more than 10 years. It's clear that currently we are running some major project at Vinci. We using not so much low carbon concrete, but because it's just almost impossible. Even though the technology now exists, it was not robust enough 10 years ago or 8 years ago when the design was made. So what is clear in terms of scaling up and accelerating everything is that the design that we are doing now should be even much more ambitious than by 2040, 30, indeed.
I just want to make a quick comment. Coming back to what Thomas said, I think this on this level, this is why it's really important we go down to regional and country level. Because I'm sure, yes, we probably could save more design on design in global north, but I'm not so sure in developing countries, because materials are very important there, expensive there. But the other thing is so much building is in the informal sector, where it's very difficult to, you know, bring the same levers. That's also one thing highlights one thing we need to look at. You know, how do we encourage more efficient building in the informal sector? I mean, one thing we're working on now is how to make more lower carbon concrete blocks, for example. If you can get it in the material in the first place, then you've got more chance of implementing it. So I think it's really, really important to come down to this regional level.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth Chege from Sustainable Energy for All and the World Green Building Council, and Kenya, Africa. With the presentations, we've seen the fantastic work that's going on. We've been part of the journey for a few years with a few of you, but I haven't really seen that shift towards Africa and your roadmap and the work plan, because you're quite right to say that buildings and cities are being designed now will exist in 2030. So they really have to have this technology in the thought process. The second part of that question is also, how are you plugging into the advocacy towards the national determined contribution updates that the countries are already showcasing and trying to draft before 2026? Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, this is exactly what we are trying to do with this roadmap accelerator, this net zero accelerator with the GCCA on partnering with the local cement association. So as far as Africa is concerned, we are actually starting now a number of roadmap in Africa. I mean, we are starting Kenya, we are starting Tanzania, we are in discussion with Uganda, we will probably start Nigeria very soon. We have, I think, Senegal on the pipeline. Probably a few more. I'm looking at that because she has the latest update. But that's exactly what we are trying to do. On the issue we have in this country is that we don't have that many GCCA members there. And we need to partner actually with local authorities. We partner actually with EPFL as well. It's a co-work. It's a cooperation with EPFL to try to come and say, look, guys. I mean, I know you are not part of this big association, etc. But look, we have something to discuss with you, and we have to start discussing that. And one of the deliverables of the roadmap is how much of the technologies, but how much, what is the curve of your things. And one of the things we want to do is to discuss then with the NDC and say, well, this is the input from the cement sector, which is at time very important in this country. I mean, we talk about 20%, 22% in some cases of the total CO2 emitted in these countries, and say, look, we want to bring our insight, our input into this, and let's discuss as a sparring, what we can do and how we can put in place regulation that will help the development of these technologies. And there are things that we can do immediately. I mean, the calcined clay is the first thing, the ready-mix work, some things on design. So these are immediate things that we can start working on standards, etc. So we are very much involved in that, and we are pushing very much in Africa, in Latin America. I mean, this is really work that we are taking very, very seriously.
I mean, if you have ideas for how to get more into this NDC process, I'm very interested because we're really focusing on Africa now. We were in Kenya a couple of weeks ago to create a technical resource center on LC3 for Africa. And, I've made calculations based on public figures of the kind of huge amounts that cement production does contribute in many countries there. It's up towards 20%. But the problem is then I also see through the UN bodies I'm working with that when you kind of talk to people from these countries, they've got so many other things they're worrying about, energy demands, everything else, that cement and construction still are on their agenda, even when it makes up such an important amount. So if you have ideas how we can really bring this to the forefront of governments, and therefore they could more encourage these CO2 saving measures that we know are accessible very quickly, then I'd be very interested to discuss.
Okay, thank you very much to all the speakers. Thanks again. And yeah.